Hello, and finally, welcome to Lady Jane Books. I am your host, Lady Jane, and I'm here with a fantastic, one of my all time favorite guests, Steve from Steve Talks Books. Hi, Steve.
Are you mixing me up with someone else, Jane? Are you sure?
I don't know. Am I?
I don't know. Maybe.
Oh,
So yeah, thank you for having me. It's been I know we know we've been trying to review this one for a while and discuss it, and we finally got to do it. So it's always fun talking books with you.
it is. I always have a good time.
Yeah,
Even if we don't love the book, we always have a good time with the actual buddy read. So I
yeah.
feel like it'll be okay. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I feel the same way.
Mhm. So, for all of those wondering, Steve and I read another Ronald Malfi. We had read his short story collection, We Should Have Left Well
Mm.
Enough Alone. And if you're interested in our thoughts on that one, you got to go check out that live stream. But we decided to give him another shot, and we read Come With Me, the full length novel. So,
Mm.
I think this one was my choice, Steve, if I'm right.
Yeah, I think so. I think we had kind of planned on reading one of his books, and we just kind of I had heard good things about it, and you had heard good things, and it was like a no brainer.
Yeah, we'll try. And he's
Yeah.
such he's such a well known name too in the
Hmm.
horror and creepy book community. So we're like, let's try it. Let's his
Yeah.
short stories might not be that great, but let's give him another shot. That's the most backhanded compliment ever.
Yeah, it was. There's it was hit and miss. There's a couple of there's a couple of really good ones, and there's some other ones
Mhm.
that weren't so good. So it
That's true. That's
was a
true.
mixed bag.
So how first to start off, how did you read this one? Did you read the physical copy? Did you read the audio book? What how did you approach the story?
I did 100% audio
Me
on
too.
this one. Yeah, did you really?
Me too. I did. I bought this because I just like the cover, to be honest. And then I was like, it's true. I'm gonna be honest here. And then I was like, oh, I'm not gonna really sit down and read it, so I bought the audiobook and sprung for that money. And so I don't know if I'll keep it. We will decide that at the end of the stream if I'm going to keep this on my shelves or not. But how was the experience of reading this on audiobook for you?
I thought the narrator was pretty good. I did have to speed it up quite a bit because
Yeah,
he's very. I don't want to say he's his voice is
slow.
a little slow. Yeah, so I had to. I went up to like 1.4, which is a lot for me. I'm usually at 1.2 is the most. But I was like at 1.4, and even then I'm like, okay, let's get on with it. Like
I did
you're
full
reading
on
too
double
slow.
speed. I did two
Oh wow.
times. That's it. I was like, we're getting through this. Come on, Jeffrey. I don't even know his name, Jeffrey, but in my mind, the guy narrating it was his name is Jeffrey. So yeah, so that was kind of an interesting experience too, because I don't know if reading it in a physical format would be better than that because the narrator, the you wouldn't call him the narrator because that's who's like talking about in the story. But who would you call? What would you call it? The
Oh,
guy
you
who's actually
mean
reading, the voice actor. Voice actor. That's it.
the voice? Yeah.
Yeah, because the voice actor was so slow. I do wonder if I would have appreciated the story a little bit more if I read it on my own
Hmm.
versus having to double up the speed. Um, but yeah, so that's interesting. I'm glad that we both read it on audiobook too, because I feel like we're gonna have similar mindsets.
I think so. Yeah, I don't think the the narrator was bad. I just think he's a little slow. So
Yeah,
it wasn't terrible. It was all right.
yeah, I agree. I agree. So what were your first what were you expecting from this book? Because I know we kind of sometimes are like, oh, it's going to be so spooky, or we're kind of trepid about it. Did you expect before you even opened the page?
I expected more of a like a paranormal or a horror book. I didn't think it'd be on the far end of horror. I thought it'd have just enough, like enough to fulfill that horror desire that we have.
Yeah,
But yeah, I wasn't quite as far on the horrors. It was more of a
yeah.
thriller, like a
To me,
whodunit.
it wasn't even a thriller. It was just a straight up mystery.
Yeah,
And I
that's
can't
fair.
tell you how disappointed I was. I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna put it out there, Steve. And I'm sorry to say it, but I don't think Ronald Malfi knows what genres are.
Hmm.
We've seen this. We've seen it, Steve. We have seen it in the short stories, right? Especially at that last one where it was not a horror thriller short story. And this is it is a horror. Right there, you can see it's listed as a horror. And Steve, this wasn't a horror. This was not a horror. Maybe like 2 pages, okay? But like 98% of it is a mystery.
That may be on his. We may be able to blame his publisher for that. They may have just labeled it as a horror book, so maybe
Okay.
maybe Ronald isn't to blame. So, but
Okay, fair
it's
enough.
possible. But giving him the benefit of the doubt. But maybe someone at the publisher decided to label it as a horror book, and maybe they didn't read it. They just thought it was a horror book like we
Maybe,
did.
maybe they saw the cover art because the cover is really great. Like it's
It is.
creepy, it's ethereal. Like this screams horror. But yeah, I see what you mean. They probably just didn't read it because if they read it, they would know this is not a horror. It's not a
No.
horror, Steve. No.
No.
Mhm.
There were a couple of moments that I thought, oh, okay, here we go. Like now the story's gonna take a turn, and we're gonna go down this horror road, but didn't go that direction. It was more of like
Yeah.
like it was a rat, or it was something else that was moving something. Or
Yeah, and or like the light in the bathroom always flickering. I love that. See, I love that type of like paranormal stuff. But then it was like that was it. And so I feel like he would like almost like you said, try to get there with a little bit of like horror elements. But when you look at the actual plot and the story arc, you missed the mark.
hmm.
And the whole like what was it, gas head or something, the like urban
Yeah,
legend, it was just such a setup that I was like, this was gonna be so good. Like Gashead's gonna be like a mythical figure, but he's like terrorizing the town. Like you could have done so many like more things with it. And sadly, it didn't push the envelope enough
hmm.
in that direction.
Yeah. I think a lot of that was just kind of like smoke and mirrors, almost
Mhm.
like a misdirection, or just like things that were in the way that didn't need to be there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, what did you think of our main character though? Like in his personality and his like direction of the story. Like, what did you think of Aaron?
For as much as well, the romance seemed legitimate. I mean, I felt
Yeah,
like they were, but I kind of wondered, like, he knows very little about his wife.
yeah,
I mean, you
yeah,
would think that he would know some of these things if they loved each other this much. So it was kind
yeah.
of like, you don't really know her whole very well after all
I
these
know there's
years.
like a whole trunk in the closet that you like never even thought about. I mean, I'd be in there like on day one. I'd be like, "What you got? What postcards are these?" But um, no, I agree. I think on I think he tried to make his grief so centralized to his
Hmm.
characterization that we could forgive things like that. Um, you know what I mean? Because I do think that him grieving Allison, which spoiler alert, Allison doesn't last long in this story.
Yeah.
That's not even a spoiler. Like she's gone on page two.
Yeah.
Um, um, I think that was probably one of the main drives to write this because I think it's supposed to be like an exploration of grief,
Hmm.
especially if you read the acknowledgement and the author note. But for me, that made him a little bit flat. Like I personally didn't care that he went on this big adventure to try to find out what Allison was like. I just didn't care. I'm just like, yeah, I know something horrible happened, and you're driving. But for some reason, I was just so emotionally detached from
Hmm.
Aaron that I was like, all right, I'll go along for the ride. But it wasn't like I had to follow him on the adventure. You know?
Yeah, I think it for an exploration of grief. I think I can kind of see like the setup where it's like the setup of her being killed, and then he has to piece together. It seemed like there could have been a different way to explore that grief
Mm.
and to find out more about his wife. And there was a lot of it that I kind of wondered if this should have been a novella.
Yeah, I got the same feeling. Yeah,
It's just too long. There's a
yeah.
lot that just didn't need to be there. A lot of, and I think we talked about this in his short story collection too. That there's just extra stuff that it doesn't add anything to the story. It doesn't do a whole. It doesn't. It's just there, and it almost felt like there were a lot of misdirections, like to try to keep us
Yeah,
guessing.
yeah, exactly. Like the whole uh, who's your friend there, like that type of thing. Like that was creepy. I really wish he incorporated more of those elements in the story. but then you find out and you're like, oh, all right, I guess. I mean, it makes sense logically, but like, it comes out of left field a little bit when you've set it up to be such a secular work. You know what I mean? Because it is like a secular mystery. He's trying to find out who killed his wife, and then to add like, who's your friend in the corner? It just, you know what I mean? It just clashed a lot. I think those elements clash together.
And just about everyone he talks to about his wife, I think almost all of them say something to the effect of, "You didn't know your wife too well, did you? Or you didn't know that about your wife, or she never told you this happened." And it's like, it's a little weird. Like you would figure he would know some of these things, or at least suspected her. I don't know. It seemed like he didn't know her very well, that she kept a lot of secrets from him.
Well, I think what's even more frustrating is that even at the end, I feel like we didn't really know his wife either. You know what I mean? We found out about what she was investigating. That's great, but that's not about his wife. You know what I mean? She's really removed from the story. And I don't know if that was purposeful or if it was just kind of something that happened. But I also think, considering, the dedication of this book, it was a strange way to, I'm trying to find the right words, to illustrate the reason why this book existed, when the secondary character, the person who's the whole purpose of the story, you don't know, like towards the entire book. It's a very strange dynamic, I think. What do you think about that, Steve?
Yeah, I think I kind of get where he was wanting to explore grief, and the author's notes, he talks about the mass shooting and the people he's known in real life, and I get all that, and I think it's something worth exploring. It just didn't seem like the right story for it. I mean,
it seemed like an afterthought a little bit. Like it seemed like he had already been writing this, maybe writing a mystery, we could say, and then maybe something happened and it was added back in or something. But I see what you're saying. That's I think what was disappointing for me, is that if for something so important and could be really, really impressive, it felt a little bit like an afterthought.
Yeah, I think it would have been more effective if the story would have been, if what he uncovers or what she was investigating was a little bit more contained. Maybe contacting her mom, or getting in touch with family members that she's been estranged from, or something on more of an emotional level, that he could deal with his grief, and he could process his grief, and maybe meet her family, and in some way replace what she left him, or connect with her in a different way. But then again, we have the end, which I thought was okay. I thought the end was okay, but you kind of see it coming, though. I thought.
Yeah. Once you think back, it becomes very, very obvious. There's too many little tiny supernatural elements that would seem very random, and so yeah, I agree that it became predictable when you saw that there was 20 more pages and it was going to be wrapped up. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And go spoilers here, but
spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. I didn't buy that he would shoot and kill I forget was it Childress or the killer?
Yeah.
He didn't seem like the kind of person who he was afraid when he first found the gun. In the house. He was shocked that there was a gun in his home. He didn't know how to use it. He was afraid of it. And then at the end, he's shooting and killing someone, point blank.
Perfect aim. And it just...
it seemed off for that character. It didn't seem like it's something he would have done.
Yeah. Something else that, the whole reveal too about who the murderer was, I felt like it could have been so much better. I was convinced it was the police chief. I was like, Steve, I was writing my review and ready to put the police chief in it, but I feel like I understand structurally why it couldn't be the police chief, because it was just too obvious too early. But the actual reveal, I felt, was very underwhelming. Mm-hmm. What did you think?
I thought so too. I thought a lot of the explanation of Childress and what his history came after the climax. It seemed like a weird setup. It wasn't very fulfilling, and I was convinced it was the police chief too, because there's a trope. They would have been, and there's a trope that kind of bothers me, is when they they make all these like small town cops seem like morons, and like there's just it's too convenient. Like this, but yeah, I was convinced it was a police chief too. I thought something was going to come back, or I thought it might be like a bigger conspiracy, or that they were,
Yeah.
protecting someone or a family member, or there was something else going on. But it just seemed kind of, like when a whoopee cushion goes off and it's like, "Brrr," it's like that's kind
Yeah,
of the way
exactly.
the end was.
And looping back to what you said earlier, there did seem to be a lot of red herrings. Like 98% of this book is red herrings. And so I think that's also what made the reveal so disappointing, because we were like, you could have set it up to be, the police chief. You could have set it up to be this person. You could have set it up to be that person. You could have set it up to be Gashead. I think that'd be a really cool story. People like sacrificing themselves to Gashead. That'd be really cool. So, so not only was the reveal like underwhelming, but then it felt kind of cheap. You know what I mean? Like it was the first character we encountered, really. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
Yeah, and there was really nothing along the way that we thought, well, maybe it was that guy. That
Yeah.
it was not. There was no like.
Yeah.
There was no
He didn't pop
callbacks
up
or.
again. No. Yeah, that's another thing. It was like kind of just like he put all the characters' name in a hat and he mixed it around and then he picked one. He's like, that's the villain. And it just happened to be him. Like, it's true.
Did a find view place and put the guy's name in?
Exactly. It was supposed to be the police chief, but then I don't know, something happened, and then he goes back and backspaces all the police chief's names. So. I don't know. There's a lot that happened with this book, but it's very weird, Steve. It's a very weird book.
Yeah, I thought it. Yeah, I don't know. It was different. What I will say, what I did enjoy about Ronald Malfi's writing is the way he describes environments, and like when they're in the bar and he's talking to the waitress, and he describes the table and the condensation on the table and the glass and the clothes that she's wearing, the people in the bar, and just the environments, the imagery. I thought he does a really good job with that. I thought that was really well done. The way he explains, it's a really clear, vivid picture in your mind of what our character is surrounded by.
I agree. I actually had the same feeling when they were playing the look for the ghost game in the car. And it's exactly like this, okay? But I envision this in my brain, like they're out on a hilltop, the fog is rolling in, they're like, look for a ghost, and I could feel that atmosphere. I will say, I agree that he is a very good atmospheric writer. So I had the same experience that I'm like, ooh, you can actually like feel that you're in this car looking for the ghosts. So that is one thing that I would agree with you.
That's one thing you'll agree with.
One thing. Yeah. What else? What were your how do you think this book could have been improved?
It could have been 200 pages shorter.
All right. Yeah. I have to say it did drag towards the middle there a little bit, even on audiobook at double speed.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think toward about the middle, it starts to kind of, I don't want to say drag, but it starts to kind of, you can tell that we're just being, the story is just being stretched when it didn't have to be. I don't know if there was like a page quota or something, or there was a word count that he had to hit, but it seemed, it just seemed like it was a lot longer than it had to be. And like you said, all the red herrings added to the length of the book that really didn't, I never really felt, there was a few characters that he talked to that I thought, well, maybe this is the person, like the police chief. But everyone else he talked to, it wasn't them. Like it wasn't them. Like they were all just kind of normal people, just randos that were just happened to be involved somehow.
Yeah, and I think honestly the same feeling went to a lot of like the plot pieces, like the time where he like was hallucinating that he was in with like Gashead and the rats and things like that. Like it just, for something that was like so secular and like it almost read like a true crime type of thing. That was a very like odd moment to just pop in there. You know what I mean? Like I kind of wish he settled on, is this a horror or is this a mystery? This feels like it should be two separate books. I think if it was an actual horror, it would be very good. Gashead and this whole like, small town, like murder, people end up dead. That's terrifying. I think that'd be really cool. But then if he had actually, or if this was marketed as a mystery, I think it would actually be very good. If you're going into the mindset with it's a murder mystery. What do you think?
I agree. I think the reason why he maybe didn't go the Gashead route is because we start off very very based in reality with the mass shooting. So I
Mm,
think it would be a strange choice to go from a mass shooting the way he loses his wife to this like horror fantastical these elements of
yeah.
like Gashead is this like this mystery and there's like a real Gashead. If it would have been like a car accident, like
Mm,
a freak car accident, then I think he could have gone a different direction. But I think it was too rooted in reality for him to go too far on the
yeah.
fantastical elements. Which that's why I kind of question that choice to make it a mass shooting. Like it, I don't know what it added to the story, or
Mm.
and then you
I-
start to wonder if they're trying to keep her from investigating the murders. And I thought maybe
yeah.
there was some kind of conspiracy or something happening that they were trying to kind of get her out of the way because she was getting too
Yeah.
close. But it
Yeah.
wasn't. It was just random.
Well, I think the author made it to be a shooting victim is because he was paying homage to his friend, which is beautiful. It
Mm.
is a beautiful way to memorialize a person that was close to him in that way. But even if that was the case, I think it could have been done in a better way. Like maybe Gas had possessed, this guy and he did what he did. You know what I mean? Like you could make it, even if it would
Mm.
started so somber, you could, because that's horror. You know what I mean? In horror, fantastical, creepy, like bizarre things happen, and so I think maybe that would have added like a stronger element because otherwise, he spends a lot of time trying to figure out who Gashead is, and it becomes so important. It's so important in her notes and like the writing it down obsessively, and then going in his head and like you know what I mean? If he wanted to go that route, I feel like he should have really committed to that because I think that could be very, very good. Like a possession type of thing,
Mm.
That's why he got dragged into this. Like, I feel like the structure of the story could have been really well done if he fully committed to that route. You know what I mean?
I think you just mentioned possession. That would have been really interesting. That would have been a great way to go
That's what I
to do
first
it.
thought because then I was like, oh, but then it turns out it was actually just random. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Like the rest of this book. Sorry.
No, that's funny. No, I think the same things. I mean, it wasn't. I don't want it to sound like I hate it. It was okay. It
It was
just
okay. It was
it
fine.
was okay. It was fine.
It was
It
fine.
was like it was fine. It was fine. But
That was it. We're not writing home about it.
no, not writing home about it. Um, but I did think the well, I did. Well, what did you think of the end of him getting shot at the end?
I have to say, I wasn't expecting that. Um, and again, I had a hard time equating that we just spent how much time trying to figure out his wife, like, about the murders and everything like that, and where the wife went to. And then suddenly we're ending on a paranormal aspect. Again, like it didn't mesh. That's part of the whole you needed to be two books. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Because yeah, I really didn't like it because I feel like, can I just say I didn't like the title either because like I know you're trying to be like all like artistic and meaningful about like all the different ways this can be interpreted and like that's supposed to be a really big one, but at the end I just didn't care and it missed the mark for me, Steve. I'm sorry. Maybe Ronald Malfi is not for me.
Yeah, I think it. Yeah, I did see some similarities between his short stories. His the romance in his short stories
Mm,
and the romance in this one. It seemed um, very similar, like the setup and
yeah,
the
yeah,
descriptions and things
yeah.
that it was pretty similar. But I did I don't know. It just seemed I don't know. It was kind of a touching ending, and the way that I kind of understand what happened. He went back and was leading him. He was, I guess,
Yeah,
space and time doesn't exist for him, so he went back and he couldn't change what had happened, but he did change what happened because he
yeah,
mentions I can't go back and save her and tell her not to leave, but I can go back and influence myself to make or to
yeah. And
leave
like
to move
rifle
things
through the
around.
papers and like
Yeah,
put on the lights. It's weird. I don't know. I
like
didn't like it.
couldn't you have like flattened her tire or something? And like
Right?
I don't know. It was a weird. I didn't quite I didn't quite get the rules of him going back and influencing himself. Why couldn't he influence
Yeah,
her
yeah, yeah.
and prevent
Like
all
the whole
this?
we haunt ourselves, but I'm like, and then something I did like, but I feel like it could have been so much better. Um, was when the psychic, which was very random, again, another very random like rabbit hole in this book, like the psychic. I can imagine people not reading it. Like, remember when the psychic happened and he went into the bathroom and turned the lights on? It just sounds like a wild book, but it's not. When the psychic was like, "Oh, she said don't open the door," and I'm honestly, I forgot about that until like the very ending.
Oh,
And I don't know if that meant like I was so engrossed in like the actual murder mystery part that I like forgot about it, or it just didn't mean anything to me. You know what I mean?
I do, and I honestly I forgot about it until you just mentioned it.
Yeah,
But I
right?
think he taught to so many people that they just all became pretty
One.
muddled. Like
Yeah.
no one really had. I don't know. No one really had. No one
Personality.
was very memorable. Like
Except
there
the
was no
police chief.
one. Yeah, that was it.
I like
And that whole thing was really interesting. I thought the time spent with the police chief and trying to figure out their murders, and I enjoyed all that, like the crimes and the way that the bodies were found and
yeah.
the timelines and all that was much more interesting than a lot of the rest of the book was, which is too bad. But
Yeah, but that's again, like if you made this into two books and you marketed it as a murder mystery, I think it could be really good. You know, because there was that gruesome element to like bodies being discovered and like what had happened and when they disappeared type of thing and like trying to track them down. That I think could have been very interesting. The problem is that we bookended this as this paranormal horror. You know what I
mhm.
mean? So, missed opportunity.
I kind of feel like the gashead stuff was added in. I'm not sure what it adds to the story. I mean, it seems like a setup that doesn't pay off because there's no
Yeah.
payoff. There's no. It's just there.
Yeah, it's just
It's
like,
I don't
oh, it's
know.
an urban legend. And we're like, okay.
All right. Okay. Sure. I guess. But
But
why?
then why is she writing it down in her book so much? What's going on over here?
Yeah. It's just some
Yeah.
strange choices. I'm guessing there was some kind of word count he had to meet or something because this seemed this seemed like it was way drawn out.
Yeah.
It could have been a novella. It would have been a lot better as a novella, like a tight novella, and with a lot of this
Yeah.
stuff just eliminated that didn't really need to be there. Um,
Yeah. I agree.
or yeah, or like a different setup or a different finale. I thought the end was okay. I thought them being reunited because he's kind of lost without her. He really has nothing without her, and he finished what she had started. But so he'd really them being back together was I guess nice to see. But like you said, it's hard to be invested in them when we didn't get a whole lot of. He didn't seem to know her very well. Like
Yeah. We didn't know her at all. Like, neither did we. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
just and she. I think it would have been better too if we had gotten some setup for them before the
I think
tragedy
we
happens.
did, but
Do we get?
it
Oh,
was awkward and it was a little much.
oh yeah, yeah. I know
Yeah.
what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I thought also again was a really weird element to this story, you
Are you
know?
talking about the smutty elements? Is that what you're?
Yes.
I always kind of cringe when men write smutty scenes because it's like,
Well, no, I mean, I don't want to get too deep into this, you know, like on a live stream, but it just, it again, like, was Allison bad? You know what I mean? Like, was that the whole point of that? Because there was a definite tone to that scene, and I don't know, just again, it was another thing that just stuck out like a sore thumb, and I'm just like, what was the point of this? Are we supposed to learn something from Allison? Is it just because we're trying to like loop in artistically this phrase? Like, what purpose did it serve? You know what I mean, Steve?
I think at the time I wondered, is she the killer?
Yeah,
Because
exactly. Which was another just red herring, which that would have been really good too, but it wasn't. You know,
that would have been cool if
that would
she
have
was
been
the
good.
killer.
Yeah,
That
because
would have been awesome.
I thought that too, because I was like, Allison, wow, okay. And that's what I thought the purpose of this was. And then he just goes on business like normal, and then it ends, and it's weird.
Yeah, it did. It did seem to. It, yeah, I don't know. If she was the killer, that would have been awesome.
That
I
would
would
have
have
been good.
loved that. That would have been so
You know
cool.
what? I just thought of something. What if, hypothetically, that was where the story was supposed to go? But because of what happened and the way she passed away, the author didn't want to bring it that way.
Maybe what I thought was that one of the victims' family members killed her because they found out that she was the killer.
Yeah, that's what I get. Yeah.
That's what I was thinking what could have happened. But yeah, it just yeah, more just a lot of red herrings that just didn't.
Steve's like, at the beginning of this conversation, I like this book, but the more Jane talks, I don't.
Well, I thought it was okay. Like it was all right. Like I wasn't I didn't hate it, but it did get a little frustrating at times because it just seemed like we're meandering. Like where are we going with this? Like what are we doing?
But like
What does
every
this mean?
turn, every single one. Like you could do that with maybe one or two. Like okay, it's red herring, but like every single element. The psychic. We had Allison's activities. We had. I'm being nice here, Steve.
The
Activities,
activities.
activities. The whole ghost thing. The whole like police chief. Like, you know,
I do know. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. But the crazy thing is how many pages is in the book? What's the paperback?
It is. How much ink did we waste? 384. I'm sorry. No, okay, that was me. That was me.
Oh man.
This is why we don't invite the authors to this anymore, Jane. 384.
So 400 pages.
Yeah.
So if someone hadn't read this book and they said, okay, explain this book to me for front to back, what happened? You could explain it, I'm sure, in 15 seconds. Like the
Yeah.
the main
The core of it.
the core of it. I mean, there's not a whole lot. That's what kind of I walked away with is that was 400 pages of like, I mean, the story is it 400 page worthy? I don't know.
No.
I don't think so.
No, it's not. No, it's not. It's not. So man loses wife. Man discovers secrets about wife, investigating murders. Man solves murders. That's not even
Man
15.
dies.
Look at me. Man dies
Yeah.
and wife comes back. I don't know. Just, yeah. No. I don't think Malfi is for us, Steve. I'm sorry to say this. I know you had such high hopes, but I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm sad to say. I think it just,
Excuse me.
it's okay. Yeah, I think yeah, I did have high hopes for it. I heard a lot of great things about it. So I was a little bit surprised that it just seemed very light. There wasn't a whole lot of meat on the bone.
Yeah.
That makes
It
sense.
felt like several writing exercises strung together. That wasn't so bad, Steve.
Oh man.
What?
No, it's shots fired. Yeah, good stuff.
It's true. I mean, what else are you gonna say about it? Like, come on.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I did kind of like the end, but I don't think it made a whole lot of sense. Like it
Yeah.
didn't. I mean, it just didn't make sense to me the way. I mean, it was nice, but it didn't. When I think back, it's like, how what? Like,
Yeah.
how did
Like
that
we
happen?
spent all this time for that. I don't know. So yeah, so in conclusion, I think we're going to wrap it up because I really don't think we have much more to say about this book, unfortunately. So, would you recommend this book to anyone, Steve? And what was your rating? We can start with your rating if you want.
My rating would be, I think it's about a 3 star. I think it's 3 stars. It's fine. It's, it's fine. Um, I would recommend this book to someone who really likes mysteries.
Yes.
Maybe they'll appreciate it more than we did. But beyond that, like if you're looking for horror, I wouldn't recommend it.
Stay away.
It's not.
Stay away.
Not a horror book. Um, yeah, I think the exploration of grief could have been done a different way to really make it more impactful. I just didn't. I just didn't really care.
That's the whole thing. We didn't really care. And as Anne says, so what I'm getting from this is that I will not be putting this book on my TBR. That is wise, Anne. That is wise. So I rated it a 2, generously. And I agree. I think I agree. I think there are some really great ideas in this book. And if those ideas were expanded upon, it could be really great, like the murder mystery aspect, the gas head thing, your wife being a killer type of thing. Those are really great ideas. Unfortunately, they don't meld together, especially in the book where you think it's a horror, but it's actually a mystery. And not even like a thriller, just a straight up mystery, to be honest. Go ahead.
Instead of all the red herrings, if you would have leaned heavily on 1 or 2 of them instead of having 15,
Brilliant.
and leaned heavy on her possibly being the killer, or of her history and her family history and the abuse she had and the way that she tried to kill, I forget his name. She had gone to kill him, and their other escapades in the bedroom. And if you'd have leaned on that heavier, that and maybe 1 or 2 other things that leaned on
Really
different,
good.
they could have been like, it would have kept you guessing, but there's just so many of them.
Yeah.
That not enough time is spent building it for you to really care, because there's so many. That's like,
that's it. I couldn't say it better than myself. It needs to be built upon.
like the sheriff, like we mentioned the sheriff, like he spent time building that. They had the conversation in the car. They talked about the bridges. They talked about the way the bodies were found. That's why that character sticks up for us. That's why we thought maybe it's the sheriff, because he spent time building that, and not just a random like paragraph here and there.
You know what would have been really cool? Even if you melded that, because Allison's from this like small town with Gashead, right? What if you melded that she was actually like one of the possessed victims, and that's why she had like the erratic behavior in their marriage, why she like had all this weird stuff, and then she is the killer, but it's because of Gashead. Like that would have been brilliant. Could you imagine a story like that? Think about that.
That sounds good. So if you can rearrange everything, what would you change about this book? If you could, that would be your change.
That would be my change. I would make it so that way it focuses more on Allison, because again, she's in it so briefly that we don't really care. I mean, we care because of the way she passed away, obviously, but for her as a character, we don't know her. So I would build up their relationship a little bit more. I would keep the way she passed away. And then I would keep most of this, like these elements, these like creepy, like trying to find the killer type of thing, but I would make it her. And then that makes the scenes, where with them together, that makes more sense on why that type of scene would be in this type of book. You know what I mean? No, because it's true. Think about it. And then, the whole psychic thing is something I would cut that. I don't think you don't need to do the whole like paranormal thing. I would straight up make this a murder mystery and have Allison be like the prime suspect, and like have these little like him thinking back of like other instances where she may have been a little bit off. And then maybe you could pin, what was his name? Chisholm?
Childress,
yes.
Childress.
And then you could make Childress a red herring, but she actually went to the school where they all went away. You know, they were high school friends. So you could do so much more with this, Steve, like so much more. And I think I just wrote another book. So yeah, how would you structure it, Steve?
I would make the mass shooter. I would make one of her victims that found out that
That's
she
good.
did it.
That's
I would
good.
make her family somehow plugged into the sheriffs that he talks to, that they were protecting her somehow. And the husband finds her like trophies that she was going around killing people. But by the end of the book, he frames someone else, and he still loves her. So he frames someone else for the murder, or he kills someone else because he loves her so much, even though she's a serial killer.
Like Chris, I call him Chris. I'm sorry, Childress. Like you could frame Childress, or then you could. You know what's even better? Look at us. We should write a book here, Steve. Move over, Ronald Malfi. We're coming for the storyline. You know what would be even cooler? Like, what if he framed the guy and then planted like a gas mask, or when they're murders, they have a gas mask, and that's why it's gas head. You know what I mean? That could be cool. That could be cool.
Or after he frames whoever else, he becomes the next serial killer, carrying on her legacy.
And then he gets like possessed by a gas head. I don't know. I want gas head in the story for my own amusement here.
Yeah, and he is the new gas head. So he takes on the mantle of gas head, and he carries on her legacy.
Exactly. And then you actually have like a gas mask, and that's like how he goes around killing people, and that's the legend of Gashead. And then you could do time travel. Okay, we're getting too much into this, but basically, any one of these ideas could have made this 1,000 times better, is what we were trying to say. In a really roundabout way.
I think we're onto something. I think that's a great idea.
So I think it's actually a pretty good story. I don't know if we could do it in intellectual property, but
no,
it's a good idea.
It's okay. It's still fun.
Okay. Any final thoughts, Steve?
Well, even though the book wasn't a standout for us, it's still always fun reading a book with you and discussing it. We still have fun.
Yeah, so we always have a good time.
Yeah, it's I no regrets. It's fun, and I appreciate you taking the time to read a book with me. And I know it takes a while for us to make it happen, but it's always worth it when we get together.
It's like semi-annual book buddy reading.
Yeah.
Except it's not even semi-annual anymore. It's like 2 years in the making.
Yeah, we'll have to do the next. Well, you can pick a dark and smutty book for us to read next.
Steve, don't.
It's on you. You said you're going to read dark and smutty books.
Be careful what you wish for, Steve. That's all I'm saying.
I saw your video. Your goals this year. You have lots of unread dark and smutty books.
I
so
do.
That would be fun to discuss. That would be fun.
Okay, that's fine. Well, maybe we'll start Allison.
Okay.
And with all that, thank you so much for everyone for watching. That is the end of our live show today. Thank you so much, Steve, for reading this with me and tolerating it, as well as your time today. It's always nice to chat with you, Steve.
You too. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Okay, and with that, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.